Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. I was 25 when that memory hit me full force during a silent subway ride. One moment I was watching the tunnel lights blur past quickly, and the next, I was 10 years old again, sitting cross-legged in the back of my troop leader's van, heading north toward a Girl Scout camp in upstate New York. The badge sash rubbed uncomfortably against my neck, and inside the vehicle almost everyone was half asleep, because traffic had turned a 2-hour drive into nearly 5. It was already past 9 o'clock on a Friday night in late June, and the sky through the windshield looked like a dark blue sheet someone had forgotten to spread over the sun. Our destination was Camp Alderbrook, a simple cluster of pinewood cabins near Lake Oigo. Normally the place was packed with kids, but that weekend only 3 troops, about 50 girls total, were staying there. We felt lucky because that meant shorter lines at the archery range and more turns roasting marshmallows at the campfire. However, arriving so late stole away the fun of the first night. Mrs. Daniels, our leader, parked next to a wooden sign with faded green arrows. We all climbed out, stiff and irritable. The damp ground gave off a smell of wet earth. It must have rained earlier. My sneakers sank slightly in the mud as I carried my bag. The cabin assigned to Troop 194 looked harmless enough. A rectangle of darkened planks, a small porch, and a screen door that creaked. Inside, there were 4 rows of metal bunk beds, 2 bare light bulbs hanging from the beams, and a single window facing the woods. We threw our bags onto the beds and rushed through our routines. Peanut butter cookies for a snack, teeth brushed with bottled water, and crumbs swept off the floor to keep raccoons away. No one talked much. Even Jasmine, the loudest of the group, kept her voice low as if the forest were a closed library. By 10:30, everything was dark. The dim moonlight streamed through the window, painting grayish bands across the room. I shared the top bunk with Claire, a shy girl who clutched a stuffed rabbit and whispered stories about her little brother, until her words faded into a steady rhythm of deep breathing. Below me, Becca slept and snored softly. Outside, the crickets chirped like tiny tuned instruments. It should have been a peaceful scene, but my stomach fluttered. I told myself it was just the usual nerves of sleeping away from home. Near midnight, I woke up to the strangest sound I had ever heard. A sharp, awkward laugh drifting through the trees. It sounded human but off-key, like someone performing for an invisible audience. The laugh started low, rose in pitch, and then abruptly stopped. Silence returned to the forest, heavy as a blanket. I stayed still, counting heartbeats, unsure if it had been real. Then the laughter came again, closer this time, tearing through the night like a rusty saw. Across the cabin, Mrs. Daniels switched on a red-lensed flashlight and checked the beds. "Everyone stay in your bunks," she ordered. The faint circle of light glided over sleeping bags and frightened eyes. Claire clutched my arm so tightly her nails dug through my sleeve. The laughter stopped. Seconds later came the crack of a branch outside, then another, as if something heavy were moving between the trunks. The foliage rustled, crushed under boots, or maybe bare feet my imagination summoned. My breathing thundered in my ears. The flashlight flickered as Mrs. Daniels moved to the window and lifted the curtain slightly. She froze, watching. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It wasn't panicked, just tight and thin. "Turn off all the lights." Not a word. The flashlight clicked off, plunging us into darkness. Only the moon painted a thin stripe on the floor. Someone began to cry. Soft, muffled sobs. Claire, still pressed against me, trembled so hard the bed shook. I wrapped my arms around her, trying to breathe quietly. From outside came another laugh, longer this time, bouncing between the trees, followed by a metallic scrape against wood. I imagined an axe dragging along the cabin's railing, though I kept telling myself it was probably a shovel or fishing gear. Then a thunderous crack split the night. It sounded like a giant board slamming against pavement, and the echo rolled over the hills, silence. A chill spread through my chest, and all the girls gasped. A moment later, bam! Another blast, and then another, spaced 3 or 4 seconds apart. After the third, the laughter returned, faster, breathless, as if the shooter found the echo of the gunfire amusing. No one screamed, no one moved. We just listened to the crunch of leaves and the steady footsteps circling the cabin. The shots stopped, but from time to time came an off-key whistle followed by snickering, like school kids sharing secrets. To my 10-year-old mind, time stretched thick and sticky. Mrs. Daniels crawled between the beds until she reached the ladder of mine. In the faint glow leaking through the window, I saw her face. Lips pressed tight, eyes silvery from reflection, forehead beaded with sweat. She spoke so quietly I had to lean down to hear. "Put on your shoes. Grab your sleeping bag and backpack if you can. No screaming. When I say go, run straight to the vans. Stay together." She repeated the plan to each girl. Outside, the noises moved toward the left side of the cabin, then to the back, branches snapping like popcorn. In the dark, we half-laced our shoes, clutched our bags to our chests, groped for backpacks. A water bottle fell to the floor with a dull thud, and the whole room tensed in fear. We waited for the laughter to return. Only the wind slipped through the boards. Mrs. Daniels pressed her ear to the glass. A minute passed, maybe 2. Suddenly, the porch steps creaked. Someone had climbed up. The wooden boards groaned under their weight. The doorknob rattled. Claire stiffened against me. It rattled again, slowly, testing every angle of the lock, unhurried. Then it stopped. A whisper slipped through the doorframe, too low to understand, followed by a soft tap on the door, almost polite. And then, nothing. In that silence, I heard my pulse hammering. Mrs. Daniels drew a deep breath. "Now," she hissed. The screen door flew open with her first step. The cabin door slammed behind her, and she bolted. We followed in a stampede, 20 girls in mismatched pajamas, sleeping bags dragging like capes, shoelaces flapping. Gravel and pine needles scratched at my ankles. The moon lit a messy path toward the parking lot, about 30 yards away. I didn't dare look back. Halfway there, another gunshot rang out, louder this time. A branch snapped above us and leaves fell like confetti. The shooter had fired into the air, or maybe at us. I ducked instinctively and kept running. We reached the vans in chaotic clusters. Mrs. Daniels threw the doors wide, pushing us inside. I scrambled over the seats to make room. Jasmine slammed the sliding door shut and locked it. Another shot echoed, farther away now but close enough to pound at my chest. Through the windshield, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the lot, tall, outlined against the pale gravel, holding something long in his hands. Even in the dim light, the shape of the gun was unmistakable. The figure lifted an arm as if waving. For a moment, he simply watched us. I remember the bright whiteness of his grin, too wide, before he faded back into the trees. Mrs. Daniels' keys shook so badly she dropped them once. Finally, the engine roared to life, headlights carving 2 tunnels through the mist. The other driver, Mrs. Patel, honked twice from the second van, a signal that she was ready. Both vehicles sped off, tires spitting stones. Through the rear window, I saw the cabins one last time, dark silhouettes beneath the pines, and a brief flicker of movement on the porch where we'd slept minutes earlier. No one spoke during the hour-long drive south. Some girls cried quietly. Claire rested her head on my shoulder, trembling with sobs. I stared out at the passing forest, half expecting to see headlights following us. None appeared. When we finally reached a 24-hour gas station near Juan, dawn was painting the horizon pink. Mrs. Daniels called 911 from a payphone. We waited inside under buzzing fluorescent lights while she gave our location and the details. A police officer arrived 20 minutes later, took notes, and promised to send rangers to Camp Alderbrook. Our parents picked us up one by one at the station. My mother hugged me so tightly her keys pressed against my back, but I barely reacted. I kept scanning the tree line beyond the gas pumps, alert for any echo of laughter. That afternoon, I collapsed on the couch and didn't wake until Sunday. The news came in fragments over the following week. The police visited our Wednesday meeting. The lead detective explained that they'd found .22 caliber shell casings near the cabins, along with liquor bottles and cigarette butts. Tire tracks suggested at least one all-terrain vehicle had passed through a service road after the shots. They believed it was local teenagers, drunk sneaking in to do target practice. When they heard the vans fleeing, they likely started the ATV and drove deeper into the state forest. The story sounded tidy, but some details didn't fit. Mrs. Daniels swore she hadn't seen any vehicle, and none of us remembered engines, only footsteps and laughter. The detective downplayed it, saying maybe they'd turned off the motor to avoid being caught. When she described the tall, calm figure in the parking lot holding a gun, he said it could have been anyone with a .22 hunting rifle. Bad timing, wrong place. Camp Alderbrook stayed closed for the rest of the season. In August, they removed the sign and padlocked the cabins. Our troop chose a beach trip for the next year. Even there, miles from the forest, I'd wake startled by the distant crack of fireworks, mistaking them for gunshots. Over the years, I tried filing the memory away under resolved, but it never quite fit. Details resurfaced. The metallic scraping against the cabin wall, the precise rhythm between gunshots, the laughter that always followed each one. Most nights I managed to forget, but sometimes on the subway or walking alone, the chill of that night returned, along with the sound of a doorknob rattling inches from my head. Last winter, curiosity got the better of me. I searched old local newspapers on microfilm. I found an article 3 days after our escape mentioning people shooting guns at Camp Alderbrook, but no arrests. However, an editorial from the same week caught my attention. Neighbors had been complaining for months about illegal hunters using spotlights to stun deer near Lake Oigo. Police had increased patrols but never caught anyone. The offenders, according to residents, mocked them by imitating hyena-like laughter in the dark. Whether those poachers were the same ones from our midnight terror, I still don't know. Maybe they only meant to scare us, not harm us. Maybe the bullet that split the branch was a mistake, or maybe a warning. The truth probably lies somewhere between recklessness and malice. One thing I'm sure of: fear doesn't vanish just because someone explains it. I'm 26 now, logical and grown, yet some nights when laughter drifts up from the street outside my apartment, I hesitate to turn off the light. I picture that cabin beneath the moonlit pines, 20 girls holding their breath, and a doorknob gently shaking. Then I remember Mrs. Daniels' firm whisper, "Run," and the way our small legs found impossible speed when freedom was only 30 yards away. If you ever camp in those woods, make sure the gate is closed, listen for branches snapping after dark, and never assume you're alone. The forest keeps its accounts. And sometimes that laughter you hear isn't from an owl or a friend, but from a stranger testing how close he can get before you run. Before continuing with the next story, if this is your first time visiting our channel, don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming horror tales. Your support means the world to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you for being here. And get ready, because what comes next may be even more unsettling. Story 2. There were 3 of us when we left Lexington early on a warm Friday in mid-September 2023. I was driving my old silver Tacoma. My cousin Mike rode shotgun, and our friend Tara sat in the back beside the tents and coolers. We wanted a quiet weekend, far from classes and work. The destination, Daniel Boone National Forest near Red River Gorge. The plan was simple: 2 nights at the Kamar Ridge Campground, daytime hikes along the cliffs and natural bridges, and returning before Sunday traffic. We reached Kentucky around 1:15 p.m., paid the fee at a small booth, and followed the narrow ridge road lined with oaks and hemlocks. A ranger truck passed. The driver lifted 2 fingers from the wheel in greeting. We chose Site 14 because the ground was flat and it had a wooden table beside a solid metal fire ring. I backed in the truck and we unloaded. Mike hung his hammock between 2 trees. Tara organized the food inside the bear-proof box. Everything felt normal, almost boring. That first night we sat by the fire and listened to the crickets sing. Another group laughed somewhere downhill. At 10 o'clock sharp, the forest sank into a deep silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. I lay down on my sleeping pad, stretched out, and let myself be lulled by the smell of smoke and pine. There were no distant trucks or snores. It was perfect. On Saturday morning, we decided to look for an old service road Mike had marked on his phone. A blog claimed it ended at a fire lookout tower abandoned for decades, with a wide view over Wolfe County. We packed light, water, jerky, a small first aid kit, and started hiking at 9. The trail began wide, enough for 2 people side by side, but after a couple of miles it narrowed to a deer path. Fallen branches forced us to duck, and the moss underfoot made the ground feel like a soaked sponge. Around 12:20, the service road vanished under dead leaves, but you could still make out 2 deep ruts cutting through the forest. They were wider than a truck's tracks, which meant something heavier had passed that way. Soon a penetrating smell of mold saturated the still air. The trees opened into a small clearing, and there it was. A beige Winnebago Brave sunk to the axles. Vines covered the mirrors, and a fallen branch had split the windshield. The headlights were gone. Only dark cavities remained, like empty eye sockets. We stopped at the edge of the clearing, unsure whether to laugh or worry. Someone had tried to hide the vehicle years ago, but time and weather had exposed it again. Late 80s, maybe early 90s, Mike said. His voice sounded too loud in that stillness. The side door hung ajar. I stepped onto the rusted step and covered my face with a bandana. Everything was coated in dust. The stove, the bunks, the steering wheel. On the counter rested a child's cup with peeling cartoons. On one of the dinette seats lay 2 faded Polaroids from a vacation in a sunny place. Then I saw it. A note. It was stuck crookedly to a cabinet with the yellow panel tape. In thick blue marker it read, "He won't let us go." My throat tightened. I snapped a photo with my phone and backed out. Tara stared at me, eyes wide. Mike kicked at the soft ground and found several spent .22 casings pocketing one. We argued about what the message meant. A joke? A breakup gone bad? Something worse? In the end, we logged the location on the GPS and decided to tell a ranger when we got back. The afternoon was already slipping past the ridge, and none of us wanted to hike in the dark. Half a kilometer farther on, I noticed fresh footprints over ours. The prints were deep, defined, still damp where the moss had been crushed. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, but Tara saw them too and pointed silently. Our truck was waiting in the trail pullout, but something was off. The driver's window was rolled down an inch, and I never left it open. I turned the key. The engine turned over once and died. Mike popped the hood. The battery terminals were tight, but the main fuse was scorched. Someone had sabotaged it. We had no cell service there. The nearest signal had been uphill toward Pine Ridge Road, at least a 40-minute climb. The sun was already dropping. We locked what we could, grabbed headlamps, and started up a forest road that switched back to a gravel overlook. Crickets sang in the brush. Far behind us, a motor coughed, heavy and slow like an old diesel, then went silent. I thought of the Winnebago and quickened my pace. Twilight washed everything in bluish shadows. Around a bend, I saw 2 beams sweep through the trees below, yellowish and weak, flickering as if the driver were switching the high beams on and off. After a few seconds, they vanished. Tara whispered the words from the note, which sounded like a curse. "He won't let us go." We reached the overlook just as night sealed the sky. On the far side of the lot stood a 60-foot steel lookout tower with a rusty warning sign. We climbed anyway. Each rung rang metallic. Up top, the wind smelled of resin and wet leaves. With barely a shaky bar of LTE, I dialed 911. The call dropped, then reconnected. On the second try, I gave our names, the campground, and the approximate coordinates. The operator said a nearby patrol would take about 25 minutes. She told us to remain where we were and keep our phones on. The platform swayed in the dark. We sat against the railing. No one was hungry anymore. At 11:34 p.m., I had stared at my watch so much the time burned into my memory. A silhouette crossed the parking lot. I thought it was a deer until it straightened and shone a flashlight toward the stairs. The beam never reached us, but it danced over the lower flights. It paused, then traced the tower's legs twice before disappearing into the trees. At last, blue lights cut through the nearby branches. A Forest Service truck pulled in, followed by a Wolfe County cruiser. Relief hit as we climbed down. The deputy took quick statements and the ranger radioed in. He told us we weren't the first to report strange things in that area, but didn't give details. They drove us back to my Tacoma. The truck was now tilted into a ditch as if someone had pushed it. The fuse box was open, several wires cut, and gasoline dripped from a ripped-out drain plug. While we stared at the mess, the wind carried a sweeter, thicker smell, a mix of burning plastic and sap. An orange glow flickered through the trees. The ranger's radio crackled. A night hiker had spotted a fire. He asked us to wait in his vehicle while he investigated. The deputy went with him. 10 minutes later, the cruiser returned alone, washed in red and blue. He said a motorhome was burning down to the chassis a mile to the north and no one was inside. The state fire marshal would investigate at dawn. With first light, pale fog floated among the hills. On the way back, we passed the overlook again. Thick black marks cut across the lot, as wide as an old motorhome. On the tower's stairs hung a torn strip of masking tape fluttering like a dead leaf. Back at the campground, we found the coolers rifled through. Packages opened, but nothing stolen, as if they'd been looking for something else. The RV note would have burned up if that vehicle was the same one now reduced to ash. But the photo remained on my phone with those shaky, hurried letters. Whoever was chasing us had taken the time to rip out the original message before setting the fire. We spent most of Saturday at the Glady Visitor Center filling out forms. The state police repeated the same questions in different order. Who wrote the note? Why were we near that motorhome? When did we see the lights? Did we know anyone in the area? Our answers didn't change. One officer bagged the burned fuse in the .22 casing. Another dusted my truck for prints without success. On Monday, the ranger called. Investigators found no license plate among the charred remains, and the VIN had been filed off years ago. They did find a half-burned Polaroid among the leaves. It showed the same Winnebago parked on a sunny road. A man and a woman smiled in front of it, with a small child holding a sign, Florida to Maine 2010. We didn't recognize them. I replay that weekend over and over, and the same question always remains. Who wrote the note? The rest has no clear answer. Why hide the RV? Who followed us? Who sabotaged my truck? But someone at some point felt trapped enough to scrawl 5 words on a cabinet door. I keep the photo on my desk. The tape's edges curl, the marker lines waver, and I imagine the author pausing to listen before sticking it on. The police never called again. They have bigger cases than an old motorhome and a sabotaged pickup. Even so, every time I pass a weathered camper on the interstate, I watch the driver, half expecting to find eyes fixed straight ahead, avoiding mine, determined to keep going until the forest swallows another lonely pull-off. I won't camp in those hills again, not without a second vehicle and a satellite phone. Kentucky's forests are deep and ancient, and they don't care how confident you feel paying at a sunny booth. Inside those mountains, a single cut wire or stolen fuse is enough to erase you. And if the person responsible leaves a message, maybe it's only 5 hurried words, soaked in fear, enough to warn the next unlucky group that he won't let you out. Story 3. I turned 20 years old in the middle of a lonely trail deep in Grand Teton National Park. Months earlier, I had decided to celebrate by pushing myself to the limit. While most people my age were planning parties or dinners, I wanted to spend 7 days in silence, surrounded by towering mountains, clean air, and no cell signal. I prepared all summer. I trained, read safety manuals, and bought a lightweight 2-person tent. big enough to store my backpack inside at night. When September came, the air was cool, not yet cold, and I felt ready. The first 3 days went exactly as planned. I woke up at sunrise, filtered water from streams, and followed the well-marked trail that wound between granite canyons. I only crossed paths with other hikers in the last hours of the afternoon near popular lakes. Each night I slept in the designated camping zones, hung my food bag on the metal cables rangers had installed, and wrote a few lines in my small notebook before drifting off. Everything seemed too easy, stable weather, no blisters, no schedule hurrying me along. Day 4 changed everything. I checked the map during a breakfast and realized I'd already passed the halfway point. I thought of my parents, who were surely telling their friends. He turns 20 today, but he's out there somewhere hiking. The idea made me smile. I decided to push myself more, walk extra miles and treat myself to finishing ahead of schedule. I packed quickly, left no trace, and started up a long ridge before the light reached the canyon floor. By midday, the sun beat down hard and I kept going. I stopped to eat a sandwich on a flat rock overlooking an empty valley. Far below, a river twisted like a silver thread, but the silence was absolute, broken only by wind and the occasional bird. The trail narrowed and turned rocky. Sometimes it disappeared under loose scree and reappeared after a bend. Several times I had to check my location with the GPS. Even so, I felt strong and continued. Toward evening, a dull ache started to bother my legs. I checked the distance and saw I'd gone nearly 4 miles farther than usual. The sensible thing would have been to stop and look for the next camping zone. Instead, I convinced myself I could add a couple more miles and still set up the tent before dark. That decision triggered a perfect storm of small mistakes. The sun slipped behind the peaks faster than expected. Shadows flooded the valley and a cold breeze descended. I reached the first designated area and found the sights already taken. 2 older men cooking pasta at one, and a couple resting inside an orange tent at the other. I gave a little wave and kept going without asking if there was room. No one wants a stranger setting up a meter away. A mile farther in the second zone, there was a blue tent and a hammock strung between bent pines. A dog barked when it saw me. I moved on. The light was fading quickly. The next sights were full too. My legs trembled from the effort. The sky turned purple behind the ridge, and the first star already shone above me. Worry began to seep in. Almost in full darkness, I reached a bend where a side trail led to a thin stream. Beside it was a patch of bare earth beneath a tall pine. The ground was nearly flat, and a ring of stones suggested someone had made a fire there years ago, though it wasn't allowed now. It wasn't an official site, but it was that or nothing. My permit specified sleeping only in approved zones, but I decided to set up there and told myself rangers rarely checked remote corners at night. I pitched the tent quickly. The pole snapped into place. The fabric fluttered in the wind. I filtered one last bottle of water, hung the food bag from a branch, and slipped inside just as the hillside fell into shadow. My heart was still pounding from the day, so I nestled into the sleeping bag, lay down, and listened to the murmur of the nearby stream. Little by little, my breathing calmed. The forest smelled of damp needles, moss, and a faint trace of campfire smoke I'd passed hours earlier. I fell asleep. I don't know how long, maybe 2 hours. A crack woke me. Something had broken a branch outside. Half asleep, I thought of a squirrel or a marmot. Without thinking, I smacked the inner wall of the tent to scare it off. The nylon thumped, and immediately something thumped back. It wasn't the wind or a stick. The fabric pressed inward for a second. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. I waited, holding my breath. Absolute silence. I convinced myself a pine cone might have fallen from the tree. I rolled onto my side, cinched the bag tight, and tried to sleep again. But what came wasn't sleep. Another crack, then another. Deliberate steps crushing dry needles. Each footfall seemed to pause, as if the creature were listening. A thin moon cast a blue glow, but with the rainfly on, I saw only vague shadows. I remembered all the warnings on the trailhead signs. You're in bear country. Make noise. store food properly. I stayed still. The headlamp was in the side pocket, the bear spray leaning by my boots at the entrance, and my tiny knife under the pillow. Suddenly, everything felt like a toy. The footsteps circled once, twice, and stopped in front of the tent. A deep snort swept across the fabric. Warm breath pressed the material near my feet. Another snort moved up toward my head. The fabric vibrated with the exhale. I pictured black eyes inches from me. I did nothing, not even close my hand around the knife. The manual said, if a bear tests your tent, stay calm, speak softly, use the spray only if it breaks in. But staying calm was impossible with a huge predator smelling me through a piece of nylon. Time became a string of heartbeats. I heard soft pads shifting, another snort, and then it moved a few yards away. The crack of branches told me it lay down nearby. That idea scared me more than the steps. An animal that leaves can go away, one that waits might be planning. Minutes passed slowly. The wind stirred the branches above. I kept my eyes open, unable to sleep. Half an hour later, it moved again, now behind the tent. The food bag hung out front, and I feared it would smell it. But it didn't head for the tree. It circled back and stopped on the other side. I felt the fabric press in by my elbow. Something scratched. A heavy claw. A short, low growl vibrated in the air. I went rigid. I grabbed the spray, popped the safety, and aimed at the door in case it attacked. I waited 5 minutes, 10 motionless. That sequence repeated several times during the night. The bear never left. It chewed something now and then, maybe roots or wood. Twice more it sniffed the tent, pressing hard. Once I swear I felt a claw slide across the zipper, testing the material. For a long stretch I heard nothing. I thought it had finally gone, until another crack, right next to my head, made me jump. Keeping my phone off to save battery kept me from tracking the hours. I could only count my breaths. 10 slow inhalations were maybe a minute. I counted hundreds. At last I noticed a silvery glow on the rainfly. The sky was lightening. Dawn was a rescue. When orange light touched the pine tops, all the sounds ceased. No steps, no snorts. The forest felt quiet in a kinder way, a prelude to birdsong. I waited longer. When the tent filled with daylight, I opened the zipper just a few inches and peeked out. Nothing. The clearing was intact, except for huge tracks the size of my outstretched hand, with 5 toes and claw marks. They ringed the tent like petals. Some overlapped. The bear had walked in circles, waiting for me to slip up. I stepped out on numb legs and checked the food bag, untouched. My backpack the same. Relief nearly knocked me over. I packed everything at top speed, erased every trace, gathered my trash, and set off with the spray still in my hand. I walked 3 miles before stopping to eat a protein bar. Even then, I scanned the woods without rest. Every dark trunk looked alive. Every shadow made me flinch. What scared me most wasn't the bear's strength, but its patience. It could have left at any time, but it stayed. I was its object of interest for hours, and nothing in my gear would have helped if curiosity had turned to aggression. In the afternoon, I found 2 rangers doing checks near a junction. They asked for my permit. My hands trembled as I handed it over. They noticed. "Rough night?" one asked. I spilled everything in one go. The unofficial campsite, the hours of stalking, the tracks. The younger one's eyes widened, the older one sighed. "A black bear, probably," he said, hooking his thumb into his vest. "Maybe 200 pounds. Sometimes they do that when they know a hiker is alone." His tone was calm, as if it were common. Part of me wanted him to scold me for pushing too hard, for camping at an unauthorized site. But he only reminded me to follow the rules for the rest of the road and radioed a brief report. Bear activity near marker 42. I kept walking. I finished the loop 2 days later, ahead of schedule. At the trailhead, I sat on a wooden bench, dusty boots, aching shoulders. Other hikers laughed, took photos, and ran to their cars. I pulled out my notebook and wrote one line. My 20th birthday lasted 5 hours longer than anyone else's, measured in fear. Back home, my friends expected theatrical gestures and roars when I told the story. Instead, I recounted simple facts: a solitary campsite, a nighttime visitor, a wait until dawn. They asked why I didn't use the spray immediately, whether I'd camp alone again. I answered, honestly, yes. But next time I'll stop when the map says to, even if there's daylight left, and I'll pick my site with the sun still high, not after it's gone. Weeks passed, then months. My pulse stopped spiking when I thought of that clearing. Even so, some nights when a branch taps my bedroom window, I wake instantly, alert, remembering the heavy footsteps and deep breath of an invisible animal inches from me. I keep the spray can on a hook by the door. It's old now, maybe half empty, but seeing it reminds me of that birthday night when I learned how thin the line is between visitor and prey. Someday I plan to return to Grand Teton, maybe on my 30th birthday. I'll hike the same trail in reverse, look for the same tree, and stand over that bare patch of earth. I don't expect to find my tracks there, but I'll kneel anyway, place my hand on the ground, and remember how the forest listened to my breathing, how I listened to its, and how the dawn finally appeared as the simplest gift a person can receive: light, warmth, and another chance to keep living.